It's not, and it is very important that we continue to guarantee the progress that we have made. I want to speak for a moment about the situation here in Ottawa, and I know that many of my colleagues in the NCR caucus have spoken very articulately and very passionately about the damage that has been caused in our communities and our neighborhoods. Mr. Speaker, I've heard some members on the opposition side try to somehow cast a minimization, some kind of effort to generalize what is going on outside of this chamber as being legitimate. It is not, Mr. Speaker. It's illegal, and it causes great harm. We've seen people intimidated, harassed, been threatened. We've seen apartment buildings that have been chained up. We've seen fires set in the corridors. Residents are terrorized. Yeah. And it is absolutely gut-wrenching to see the sense of abandonment and helplessness that they have felt now for weeks. And I want to assure them that since day one, that the federal government has done everything that it could to provide additional resources. The RCMP has sent three sets of reinforcements to the Ottawa Police Service, and will continue to do whatever we can to help. But it is also important, I think, for members of this chamber to recognize that we here, we write the laws, we set the policies, but we trust our police, our law enforcement, to enforce them. And that is why it is so important that we use every tool in our box, especially now, where we find ourselves in a predicament, in a dilemma, in a situation that has perhaps never been seen before. Now, I ask myself, Mr. Speaker, and I hope others are reflecting as well, what's this all about? And trying to step back and looking at what it is that's occurring. And I'm concerned. I've heard some people say, and still say, that this is a protest about vaccines. It's not. Or that it's a protest about mandates. It is not. I've heard some people say still that this is a protest about freedom. Mr. Speaker, what is going on outside in the streets of Canada at our borders is most certainly not about freedom.
Absolutely not.
It is not about freedom. It is about a very small, organized, and targeted group of individuals who are trying to strip away the very freedoms that we here have sworn to uphold.
Exactly.
That are the generations of those who preceded us have sworn to uphold, Mr. Speaker. Now, I've seen many striking similarities in the way that these blockades have manifested across the country, the tactics that they are using, the timing in which they are occurring, the targets, whether they are national symbols, like the Parliament here, or provincial legislatures, like the War Monument outside, where we hear members speak passionately about their forebears who went and made the sacrifices for the freedoms that we now enjoy. The individuals outside are tearing down the barriers to attack those monuments. Now, what does that say? Those are going. I know members are heckling, but I'm encouraging them to reflect. And also the rhetoric, Mr. Speaker. And yes, the rhetoric. And yes, Mr. Speaker. Notwithstanding the efforts of my colleagues to try to shout me down, I'm speaking here on behalf of constituents and Canadians, Mr. Speaker. And yes, there is an ideologically motivated operation that we see in the rhetoric here that is meant to incite. And that is indeed one of the reasons why, Mr. Speaker, that we have chosen, that we've had to invoke the Emergencies Act. Now, I want to assure members that these are very targeted measures, that they are time limited, that they are protected and bound by the Charter. And for those who want to ask questions as to how those powers are going to be enforced, part of the debate is going to ensure that there are the sufficient guardrails and safeguards in place. There will be transparency on how those measures are implemented. There will also be an inquiry to be sure, so that we can learn from these lessons and make sure that this is an instrument that has been used responsibly and in a manner that is consistent with the Charter to uphold the health and safety of all Canadians, Mr. Speaker. Now, at the end of the day, we're all here, I would hope, to do one thing, and that is to protect the health and safety of Canadians. We find ourselves at a crossroads with the pandemic, but we've made progress. We've made progress with the pandemic, Mr. Speaker, and we are making progress in restoring public order. But it is absolutely imperative that we have these debates in a principled, in a reasonable manner, that is respectful of our constituents, respectful of Canadians, and that is certainly something that I hope that we will see over the next number of days.
Question et commentaire, questions and comments. The Honourable Member for Sturgeon River Parkland.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Minister today and in a news conference yesterday has repeatedly stated that there is an ideologically motivated violent extremist. There is a small group of extremists who are willing to use violence. He says that there are ties between extremists that were apprehended in Coutts and extremists here in Ottawa. But when asked repeatedly by the media to back up that assertion with evidence, the Minister failed to provide any evidence. We are talking about invoking a once in 34-year Emergencies Act. Parliamentarians deserve real evidence, not conjecture from this minister before we can ever contemplate suspending the rights of Canadians. And what basis does this minister make to claim that there are violent extremists in Ottawa?
The Honourable Minister.
I want to thank my colleague for the question, and I'm afraid he operates from the false premise that the Emergencies Act is any kind of suspension of charter rights. It's not. As I've said throughout the course of the debate, and as the Act itself says, that all of the powers that need to be exercised in the Emergencies Act must be done in accordance with the Charter. Mr. Speaker, that means ensuring that Section 8 is respected. That means which protects people from the right of It guarantees the right to be protected from any unreasonable search and seizure, and same for Section 7 as well. Thank you.
Commentaire, question.